coming from Fukushima is larger than the bomb testing from the 50s and 60s?
Well, the signal that they're getting in Japan certainly is. It remains to be seen how much of that radioactivity is going to come to the United States. Again, our concern is because it exists as a dust particle, it can actually land somewhere and continuously expose someone. It also means that because it's a physical thing, we actually have some chemistry that might help us deal with it. But there's going to be a lot more monitoring required as we try and figure out how big a problem this is going to be in the United States. Certainly we can detect it, and we can see that these particles are here, but we need to start looking at some of the things like sensitive food crops, the kinds of plant material that we know tend to collect radioactive particles and incorporate them into the plant. We need to start looking at that and find out how serious the problem really is going to be for us.
Where will people find that kind of information? Where can they look to say, see what they should eat, what they should grow, should they not? Is this going to, you said something earlier about in the soil, is this going to impact people who garden? I've received hundreds of questions about that.
It potentially could. There are some long-lived materials like cesium that stay radioactive for a long time. And cesium tends to do the same thing in soil that potassium does. I think a lot of gardeners are familiar with potassium-based fertilizers. Potash contains potassium. Cesium, even though it's radioactive, mimics that potassium. So it's going to behave the same way that the potassium does. That's a concern. That's going to take a consistent sampling effort to see how much of that is being incorporated into the food plants before they get into the market. We did something similar with the BP oil spill, where the FDA and independent agencies, including my institute, tested seafood, oysters, crabs, and found oil in those commercial products. We're going to have an even bigger effort now to look for radiation, because this is going to be a nationwide problem, not just limited to one region of the country.
But I read something about the EPA not testing fish, choosing not to test fish, and that some of the monitoring has been turned off. What do we do about that?
I haven't seen any data for fish or for agricultural products except milk at this point. We are detecting levels of radiation in milk because of the radioactive iodine that tends to accumulate in dairy products. I think what we need to do is expand what we're doing and look at crops that might be sensitive to picking up radiation from dusty fallout. And without the numbers, we're really not informed enough to make any decisions.
So what should people do at this point?
I think what people should do is remember that we have learned to try and deal with toxic dust for a long time. I think through public education we've dramatically reduced exposures to lead in dust for children. It was a major public health issue, and we were able to take some corrective action and deal with the problem. We may need to, based on what our data tells us, do something of a similar scale and try and find those ways that we can protect the public health by reducing exposure to radioactive dusts. But the first step is going to be testing. Without the numbers, we really don't know how much we have to proceed, how much of this corrective action needs to be taken.
So in answer to our viewers and listeners, what should they be doing now? People have called me and I've said, contact your mayor, your governor, your state reps, and most importantly, your federal reps. Let's get the monitoring system back up and working and doing what it needs to do to protect us. Am I on target?
I think you're partly on target, but I'm also going to speak to people who might be in Japan or in an area where there is radioactive fallout that is accumulated. And there you're going to have to practice good dust hygiene. Some of the things are very simple. That might simply be making sure that you're washing your hands before you prepare food. None of this is going to sound like rocket science. We've dealt with this before with other issues. This is something that we can test for, and there are ways to remove radioactive dust from food if they've fallen out. If they've been absorbed by the plants, then it might be that we need to make sure those materials just don't make it into commerce.
Well, this is radioactive dust that we can all inhale, correct?
Yes, it is.
So what does that mean for people coming in and out of a house? That means leave your shoes at the door and, you know, not drag your outer clothing all the way through the house. Am I correct?
Those are good answers. In our own laboratory, we have to take a lot of dust control measures, and it's true. Shoes and sneakers stay outside, overcoats stay outside in the hallway. You don't want to bring that dust into your home. About 70% of the dust inside the home is really just dirt particles from the area immediately around your house or apartment. So you can reduce the amount of dust that's coming into your home. And think about that before you undertake, say, a home renovation. We've seen this on a small scale before, where people who renovate homes near a source of radioactive dust from a particular plant or accident will have to take extra dust control measures so that they don't become exposed when they raise the dust due to doing work on your home.
Well, that makes sense. But what about, we're coming up on the summer months, both here and in Japan. What does that mean for people who want to run outside or do activities that are vacation activities?
You know, these are tough questions. Probably for most people, even in most of Japan, the health benefits of being outdoors and getting that exercise and having fresh foods will outweigh your radiation risks. One thing we did find out during the period where we did do nuclear testing above ground was that sometimes the weather will drop a relatively concentrated amount of fallout in a small area, often far distant from where the detonation took place. So again, there's going to have to be a certain amount of testing. Maybe we'll find ourselves having a radioactive pollution alert in the same way we might have an ozone alert in the hot days of the summer in a major city, where they say if you're going to exercise, maybe you just shouldn't do it tomorrow morning.
Well, that makes sense. But we have to get, again, that brings us back to getting our officials, wherever that is, if that's in a prefecture in Japan or that's, you know, in a state in the U.S. or a province in Canada, we need to get our officials on board to help with this process.
It's true, because even if you happen to have a Geiger counter, just holding a Geiger counter out the window doesn't really work. It won't measure that dusty fallout. That usually takes more expensive equipment, and it's a harder thing to do. So yeah, we are looking at asking our government agencies to take on this burden. It's going to be serious, and we're going to want to get that information in a timely way.
Marco, thank you so much. I'm hoping that you'll come back again, because I think that this will generate even more questions and that you'll have more to share with us. Is there anything in closing that you really want to let our viewers know?
Well, we'll keep looking for these radioactive particulates and hopefully get this data out and published as quickly as possible. And thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming and for participating in this effort to let people know what's really happening in Fukushima. Thank you.